everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Very Cold Lasagna podcast, your filthy casual place for all the filthy casual takes on the world of sports. I am DylanLasagna. Welcome to another episode of this icy yet spicy podcast. It's episode number 136, and yeah, we're winding down towards the very end of our NFL season recap month, but we still have a fifth part of it though. We're getting there. We're getting towards that very end. But we have 4 teams to cover today, and those teams are the divisional round teams that just didn't make the cut into Conference Championship weekend nor Super Bowl weekend. So we got 4 teams on hand, and then 3 final teams in our final part of season recap month. I can't believe it. We're almost near the end. And I gotta say, this was a lot of fun doing this year. This year, obviously, the first year was obviously very difficult, but this year was a lot of fun. Even though the general NFL season this past year was so, but doing the season recaps, honestly, the more teams I did, it got a lot better. It definitely got a lot better. So yeah, strap in. We got 4 more teams to cover in this parter, and then we got the next episode, which will be the final 3 teams. So yeah, I'm ready. I am ready. I hope you are. As we cover these divisional playoff teams. Obviously, if you missed the other 4 parts of our season recap month, go check them out. There was a lot of teams that we covered. And obviously, if you missed anything in relation to Very Cold Lasagna, make sure you listen to the episodes, whether it's on YouTube or on audio. Very Cold Lasagna is available on multiple platforms. Obviously, check Very Cold Lasagna out on social media, on Twitter and Instagram at Very Cold Lasagna. Rate and review the show on your preferred audio device, whether it's on Apple, Spotify for podcasters, and Google Podcasts. It's so weird to say that, Spotify for podcasters, ever since it went away from Anchor FM. And if you're watching this on YouTube, leave a comment, like, smash the subscribe button, do all that good jazz. So anyway, with that being said, let's get into part 5 of our 2022 NFL season recaps. So now we begin part 5 of our 2022 NFL season recap month as we look at the 4 divisional playoff losers that just couldn't make the cut into Conference Championship Sunday, let alone Super Bowl Sunday this year, as we first take a look at the all-elite Jacksonville Jaguars in the land of Duval country. So, in the last few years, the Jacksonville Jaguars were the absolute laughingstock of the league. But 2021 really took the cake for them because when you had a college head coach in Urban Meyer, he didn't really take the transition very well in his first and only year. A lot of on-field and off-field scandals throughout his one and only year, and was fired shortly before the season ended. And when you looked at that Week 18 game at the Indianapolis Colts, sure they won, but yeah, and their entire fan base dressed up in clown suits in the land of AEW. But at least for the all-elite Jaguars, they rectified that mistake by hiring a former Super Bowl winning head coach in Doug Peterson. Was it going to be enough to lead them away from Clownsville? I don't know. It was remained to be seen in 2022. They weren't expected to compete for anything meaningful this past season, at least in my eyes, in many others. But the most important thing for Jacksonville that coming season was how their first overall pick for 2021, Trevor Lawrence, their quarterback, would perform in year 2 under this new head coach. And at least fortunately for the Jaguars, the newly coached Jacksonville team showed some promise, especially Trevor Lawrence. He showed more strides, making smarter decisions in passing each week, and he looked like a better quarterback under Doug Peterson. So for the Jags, they started out 2-1. But then after that, even though Trevor Lawrence showed improvement, the rest of his team kind of left a lot to be desired. They proceeded to lose their next 6 to 7 games, mainly because the rushing and the receiving game, pretty much Trevor Lawrence's supporting cast, didn't do a whole lot to create big play opportunities or find open areas of space to make those opportunities happen. And defensively, they were bad against even the most inconsistent of quarterbacks, like Matt Ryan, Daniel Jones, and even a bad Russell Wilson-led Denver offense. They couldn't pressure them either. So by the time they get to their bye week, they were 3-7. They seemed destined to be those same old all-elite Jaguars that we've known them before. But then they began to pick it up with dominant wins over, of course, bad teams, because that's what a seemingly good team does on a good run. But then they also got some quality wins, including one against the Baltimore Ravens, which jump-started their good second-half run, and then even the Dallas Cowboys. They went 6-1 in the final stretch of the season, and by the time they got to the end of the regular season, they were keeping pace with the Tennessee Titans in the AFC South division race. So the Titans were facing injury woes late in the season, but the Jaguars had an opportunity to win the division in a Week 18 game against a Ryan Tannehill-less Titans. Yeah, they had a lot of difficulty moving the ball due to Tennessee's defense, but they got some luck and claimed their fame to the AFC South title and got a playoff game against the Chargers at home. But, they faced some difficulty very early on and very frequently. They fell into a rapid 27-0 hole because Trevor Lawrence threw 4 interceptions and there were a lot of miscues on special teams. But they managed to claw their way back. We all remember that big comeback, or in this case of the Clippers, that big choke by them. And Trevor Lawrence pretty much pulled out the reverse Uno card, threw for 4 touchdowns. Jaguars outscored the Clippers in the second half, and they moved on to the divisional game against the Kansas City Chiefs. But unfortunately for the Jaguars, they struggled to contain a Chiefs team that, even though they didn't have Patrick Mahomes early on in the game to an ankle injury, and when he came back, the Jaguars still couldn't find a way to take them down, especially when Mahomes was just in the pocket, frequently finding so many different guys that's not named Travis Kelce. And the Jags fell to the eventual Super Bowl champions. So overall, even though the Jags couldn't pull off an upset in the divisional game, they had themselves a successful season. Trevor Lawrence, in his second year, greatly benefited from first-year head coach Doug Peterson. They got some nice flashes from the rookies, Trayvon Walker and linebacker Devin Lloyd, their first-round rookies. And I think both of them could be great assets going into year 2 alongside veteran Josh Allen, the linebacker, not the Bills quarterback. And then late in the season, even though the defensive play was so-so, the supporting cast around Trevor Lawrence, they were playing much better. Travis Etienne, the running back, tight end Evan Ingram, and receiver Jamal Agnew all played very well. They stepped up, finally, for Trevor Lawrence. So, overall, the Jaguars had a successful 9-inning season, won the AFC South, and, going as the offseason's going on, even though they're not really doing much in free agency, not sure why, they're looking to build on that success. Maybe do more than just repeat as division champions, especially considering how weak the AFC South is right now. So looking at some of their moves right now, obviously they got Calvin Ridley back, their receiver that they traded for last year. He got reinstated by the NFL after serving a year-long suspension for gambling on Falcons games when he was a member of the Atlanta Falcons during the 2021 season. So having Calvin Ridley back is going to be a huge benefit for Trevor Lawrence. He'll probably be the number 1 receiver in that offense alongside Jamal Agnew. But they did lose right tackle Jawan Taylor to the Chiefs and defensive end Arden Key to the Titans, 2 multi-year deals. So they're going to have to find replacements for that. They franchise tag Evan Ingram, but they are working on a long-term deal. They also re-signed safety Andrew Wingard. So a good part of that defense. So some of the things that they still have to address. It seems like they're focusing more on the draft and building from there. I think they do have to focus on upgrading most of that defense. Their defense, had its key moments last year to get the Jaguars into the playoffs, but like I said, it still needs some improvement in most areas. They still need to find some at least 2 corners in the upcoming draft. Hope they pan out to be day 1 starters. Maybe that's when they at least use 1 first-round pick on one of them. They could also use some help on the interior pass rush because they had some difficulty getting to the quarterback, get some inside pressure in there. And then maybe retool the offensive line. Like I said, you lost Jawan Taylor in free agency, so you got to find a replacement for him. And maybe beef up the interior offensive line to help out guard Brandon Sheriff and center Tyler Shantley. So, yeah, get some help with the offensive line and upgrade most of your defense. So overall for the Jaguars, a little nice turnaround from their all-elite disaster from 2021. And, yeah, you were division champions in 2022. Now, can you manage to build on that in 2023? That remains to be seen. But it seems like, at least for now, Shahid Khan, the owner, and Trent Baalke, the general manager, made the right choice in hiring Doug Peterson a year ago. Now, again, it's a little weird that they're not really doing anything in free agency. But if they can nail those draft picks, and, Trent Baalke hasn't had a great history with draft picks. But if he could somehow find a way to at least nail the lineage of draft picks that Jacksonville has, then Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars could potentially be even more successful in not just the AFC South, but maybe in the AFC this fall. So now we go from the land of all elite to the big blue side of New York City. And that is, of course, talking about the New York Giants. So the New York Giants going into 2022, we're bringing in their fourth head coach in, I believe it's 5 years since Tom Coughlin retired. This one being former Bills offensive coordinator Brian Daboll. So they're going from the Judge in Joe Judge to former Bills offensive coordinator Brian Daboll, who is known for turning Josh Allen's career around into one of the league's best quarterbacks. So along with bringing in a new head coach, the Giants were not only entering what was supposed to be a proper rebuilding year for them, because they tried that and failed that with multiple head coaches, but they were also entering contract years for both Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley. So the quarterback running back duo, they didn't have their fifth-year options picked up about a year ago, and now they're entering this year like it was a prove-it year, because this ongoing offseason, they were going to be free agents. At least we'll get there, actually. But entering last offseason, going into the 2022 season, they were facing a lot of questions about their long-term viability. Like Daniel Jones didn't exactly have a great track record in his 4 years with a lot of turnovers. And Saquon Barkley had a pretty bad injury history. And, despite a neutral offseason, the Giants weren't expected to make much noise. So, yeah, about that. Surprisingly, the Giants managed to start 6-1 in the first half of the season. Brian Daboll, did a solid job keying into Daniel Jones' strengths, which that being more of a pocket passer, Daniel Jones taking more shots down the field, in the middle, rather than checking it down so much. They really took advantage of his rushing ability. We saw a lot more of Daniel Jones, the runner, and it did pretty well for them. And Saquon Barkley managed to stay healthy all year long, and thanks to the revamped offensive line, which held up pretty solid, he was one of the league's most efficient runners. But in fairness to a lot of people out there, the teams that the Giants played in that 6-1 stretch weren't exactly quality teams, like the Titans, the Panthers, and the Bears. Yeah, they did play like playoff, not necessarily one playoff team, but they did play a team that had a good quarterback in Aaron Rodgers and a playoff team in the Baltimore Ravens. But they fumbled against actual quality teams like the Seahawks, the Cowboys, and the Eagles. Mainly in part due to the big fatal flaw of being too over-reliant on Saquon and Daniel Jones, mainly his rushing ability. So, after that 6-1 stretch, the Giants would still find themselves barely hanging on the thread of their playoff hopes, because they went 3-4-1 after that stretch. But late in December, they would win over Washington. Then they would clinch a playoff berth over the Indianapolis Colts. Yes, Jeff Saturday's Indianapolis Colts, along with some help around the league. And the Giants, yeah, they would get their first winning record at 9-7-1 and their first playoff berth since 2016. So they were the 6th seed in the playoffs. And yeah, they would outlast the fraudulent Minnesota Vikings and pretty much dominate them no matter what the box score says. But then, yeah, the limitations showed against the top seed Philadelphia Eagles. They were smashed. They were crushed by them. But overall, the Giants turned out to be a little bit of a surprise this past season. Brian Daboll cooked up something pretty good with Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, that quarterback running back duo that had not too much success in the first 4 to 5 years there. Also, one of the big names that I didn't mention all that much was their 5th overall pick in Kayvon Thibodeau, who was a one-man crew in the pass rush late in the season. But while the Giants overachieved some, they still have some opportunity to improve and hope for another potential run again. Maybe, just maybe, in 2023. I mean, they could be worse than the other team down in the basement in the NFC East. But looking at their offseason so far, obviously the biggest move that they made was re-signing Daniel Jones to a big, fat 4-year contract. Now, I have my reservations about this. After one good year, they decided to sign Daniel Jones to a big, fat contract. All I can say is I just hope that the Giants don't regret this. They probably will. I'm certainly thinking that they will, but we shall see. They also franchise tagged Saquon Barkley, so obviously that was going to be a difficult decision for New York going into this offseason. What are they going to do? Are they be able to keep both Daniel Jones and Saquon Barkley? Or were they going to have to sacrifice one or the other? Well, they managed to keep both, but they had to franchise tag Saquon. So, they got to keep both, but at a compromise. They also made a big move to go trade for Raiders tight end Darren Waller. All they had to give up was a 3rd-round pick, so not a bad trade-off for them. It's just only a matter of can Darren Waller stay healthy to be effective in this Giants offense. We shall see. They also signed former Colts receiver Paris Campbell. Third wide receiver 3 for them. Okay. So some of the things they still have to address going into 2023, they got to improve the defense still. Obviously, Kayvon Thibodeau was a really good pass rusher for them, and safety Adoree Jackson was effective in the secondary. But they still need some help if the Giants want to limit those opportunities of opposing offenses. And if they want to improve, if in the case of Thibodeau, get Thibodeau some help in the pass rush. And for Adoree Jackson in the secondary, limit those passing plays. They already signed linebacker Bobby Okere from the Colts to help with the run defense. But again, you're going to have to get some help at corner and safety. And then, of course, continue to find help at the offensive line. It started to falter a little bit late in the season. And the last thing you want to do is have Daniel Jones falter again with a crappy offensive line. Your center, John Feliciano, has gone to the 49ers. So the Giants are going to have to find some upgrades at not just the center position, but at the guard position as well. Maybe the upcoming NFL draft is where they address the offensive line. So for the Giants, they exceeded expectations in Brian Daboll's first year in what was supposed to be a rebuilding year. But hey, they exceeded expectations. But yeah, as seen in that divisional game against the Philadelphia Eagles, maybe they went a little bit overboard with those expectations. So they still have a long way to go in terms of trying to make positive strides. And yeah, I still have a lot of reservations about them giving Daniel Jones a big fat contract after only having one good year, which was this year, out of the 5 years that he's been in the NFL. But let's wait a bit. Let's see how this offseason pans out, and then let's wait till we get to the summer, and let's wait till we get to the regular season, so it plays out before we find out if Daniel Jones, or Danny Dimes, as many people like to call him, reverts back to Danny Pennies this coming fall. Next, we're gonna go from the Big Blue to the Big D, going from one NFC East team to the other, and talking about the Dallas Cowboys. Hey! How about them Cowboys? Yeehaw! So, for as annoying as their fan base is, the Dallas Cowboys did have a valid case in the 2021 season to make a Super Bowl run with a very balanced team. I talked about that in both my season recap for them last year and my season preview for them last July. Unfortunately, a lot of inconsistency from their quarterback, Dak Prescott, reared its ugly head late in that season, including that wild card game against San Francisco. What do I mean by inconsistency? Well, Dak Prescott played very well one game, throwing for like a good amount of touchdowns and playing very effectively as a passer. And then the next game, he would play very bad, throwing for a lot of turnovers and missing his throws. And in that wild card game against San Francisco, we would get the bad Dak Prescott. So with that best chance to make that Super Bowl run gone, they lost a lot of key players last offseason, notably on the offensive line. And they also lost a key pass rusher in Randy Gregory. And they also traded away a receiver in Amari Cooper, Dak Prescott's second best weapon, next to top receiver CeeDee Lamb. So they couldn't really do a lot to replace some of these big losses because they didn't have any money to spend. And their draft picks were TBD at the time. So going into this season, they lost a lot of key pieces. Their other receiver, Michael Gallup, was going to miss a good chunk of the season. So I didn't exactly favor the Cowboys to do all that well. But then again, a lot of it depended on how well they would handle that offseason turnover. Needless to say, when the season started, they got off to a pretty bad start. They lost to the Bucs in blowout fashion, and then of course, prime time. But perhaps the worst news that they faced in that game was Dak Prescott being out multiple weeks with the thumb injury he suffered in that game. So at the time, it seemed like Dallas was destined for hard times. But in actuality, that turned out to be the opposite case. Backup Cooper Rush actually fared well in the six games he played when Dak was out. Receiver CeeDee Lamb, running back Tony Pollard, performed pretty well, like they usually do, being the consistent co-star engines of that offense, being aided by a strong defensive line that still had DeMarcus Lawrence, still had Michael Parsons. Yes, he moved to the edge. And Dorrance Armstrong. The Cowboys went 4-1, only losing to the top seed Philadelphia Eagles in that last game before Dak Prescott's return. And then after Dak came back, they still managed to keep pace with Philadelphia in the NFC East by winning the next 6 of 8 games, going into a Christmas Eve matchup against Philadelphia. And the Cowboys barely won. Even though it wasn't against Jalen Hurts, hey, they managed to keep up the fight. And Dallas barely won it. So nonetheless, that win, and the next one against the Tennessee Titans, while having Philadelphia, again, without Jalen Hurts and with Gardner Minshew, the backup, losing to the Saints, gave Dallas an ever so slight opportunity to steal away the NFC East and perhaps a very small chance to get the top seed in the NFC. All it had to do in Week 18 was beat up on a Washington Commanders team that didn't know it was going to be eliminated for playoff contention in Week 17. And all it had to do was beat up on a team that just decided to start rookie quarterback Sam Howell, howling like a wolf. Oh! And hope for the backup filled Giants, who had nothing to play for because they already clinched the playoff spot, to beat the Eagles, who were going to get Jalen Hurts back. However, even though the Eagles beat the Giants, that wasn't the story of Week 18. The story of Week 18 was how the Cowboys couldn't even get their end of the deal. They couldn't even get their end of the deal right. They were completely blown out, embarrassed, destroyed by the Wolf, Sam Howell, and the Washington Commanders in Week 18. How do you let that happen? How do you get boat raced by a rookie quarterback that is now just starting? That a team that just decided, oh, hey, we're going to throw our third round rookie quarterback into the fire. And yeah, we'll have him. Yeah, he didn't play exactly well. It was a team effort, but still, they whooped your ass. Like, what the hell? Dak Prescott played so bad in that game, throwing 2 interceptions. One is a pick 6. How do you play that bad? So, anyway, they ended up redacting that anyway. Sure. They got a 12-5 record and another playoff berth. And yeah, they redacted that by sending Tom Brady and the Bucs into the sinking ship and sending Tom Brady into retirement. But the Bucs were a bad team themselves all season. So that good performance, that Dak Prescott and the Cowboys had against Tampa was nowhere to be found against a much better defense in the 49ers in the divisional game, in which the Cowboys had plenty of opportunities to try and take that game, especially against a rookie quarterback in Brock Purdy. But they couldn't, especially Dak. And yet again, they couldn't reach the NFC title game. So, yeah, Dallas overall exceeded my personal preseason expectations for them. They went 12-5, matched their last season record, even though they ended their regular season pretty embarrassingly. But my biggest concern with them as the season wore on was, how many times did I say his name in the last minute or so? Dak Prescott. Once again, he was too on and off with how he played, because he would look like an MVP candidate one week, and then for 2 straight weeks after that, he would look like Baker Mayfield. Even with his good games, he would have at least one turnover to show for it. And that would nearly kill his team. And for the inconsistent games he had, it really killed his team. So for the Cowboys, his inconsistency killed them again when it mattered most. And mind you, this happened against the exact same team that the Cowboys played in the playoffs last year. So going into this offseason, I mean, like right now, I'm not saying don't trade or cut Dak, because the Cowboys most certainly can't at all because of his big fat contract. I'm just saying that, you had literally 2 opportunities now to try and make a Super Bowl run. I mean, even though it was kind of unrealistic this past season. But I'm just saying that at some point, they're going to have to keep tabs on Dak. Because if he keeps playing like this, how much longer are you going to have to trust him? I'm just saying. So looking at some of their offseason moves so far, they did make some big moves to try and help out their quarterback. I mean, yeah, you already got like CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, but you kind of need that third option, And that's exactly what the Cowboys did. They traded for receiver Brandon Cooks from the Houston Texans. All they had to give up was a 5th round pick and a 6th from this year, and then next year's 6th round pick. So, hey, not a bad trade off, I guess, for the Dallas Cowboys. They needed that third option, and they definitely got it. But they did need some help, definitely on the secondary. That was one of my team needs, even though I didn't really list it on here. But they needed a corner opposite Trayvon Diggs, and they got one. And corner Stephon Gilmore from the Colts in return for this year's 5th round pick. Now, my only thing is, how much longer is Stephon Gilmore going to play? I mean, he's like, 30, 32? If he could play that much longer, great. I appreciate that. But, at some point in time, you got to find a long-term option if you're Dallas, if, he starts to slow down. But, I mean, if he's not, then good. They franchise tagged running back Tony Pollard, and they also released running back Ezekiel Elliott. So, yeah, kind of an end of the era for Dallas, releasing running back Ezekiel Elliott, but he was starting to get spaghetti legs anyway. And Tony Pollard was their new starting to transition into that new starting back role. So in turn, after releasing Ezekiel Elliott, they signed free agent running back Ronald Jones, and yeah, it's whatever. So some of the things I still have to address for the rest of this offseason, going to the draft, I say they have to retool both of the trenches. So what I mean by that, defensively, they need some help getting pressure on the inside. Obviously, they do have a lot of tools on the edge in the pass rush, but they don't have really much when it comes to defensive tackles. Like, how are they going to get interior pressure? They had some difficulty against better offensive lines. And And it created a lot of more pressure for Michael Parsons and DeMarcus Lawrence to go and get the quarterback on the outside. So they need help on the inside. As for the offensive line, they remain a strong unit, but, they just lost starting guard Connor McGovern to the Buffalo Bills. So they need to find another lineman to play alongside Zach Martin up front. Otherwise, that offensive line that usually touted so well around the league is going to get weaker. And you got to find a new starting tight end. The Cowboys and Dalton Schultz somehow didn't come up to an agreement, and Schultz just signed a 1-year prove-it deal with the Houston Texans, so he's going on the other side of Texas now. So Dallas has to find a new weapon up the middle for Dak. So for overall, the Cowboys had another good shot to make a surprise run at the NFC title game, but unfortunately, their own inconsistency, especially with Dak Prescott, doomed them once again. I mean, they did get 2 solid pieces to try again this coming fall, but like I said, at some point in time, you have to ask that question if their chances to get to the big dance with that team are rapidly closing, if they haven't already. So for our final team in NFL season recap part 5, 2022, we go from the Big D back to New York, except it's on the western side. We now talk about the Buffalo Bills. So the Bills were entering 2022 after a heartbreaking divisional playoff loss to the Kansas City Chiefs in that crazy game in the 2021 playoffs. They were entering this past season as one of the premier Super Bowl favorites, seeking to finally get over the hump. Yes, that hump of not getting to the Super Bowl in over 20 years and making it back to the big game. And to do that, one of the big moves was getting linebacker Von Miller, because one of the problems that the Bills had in that divisional game was not getting to Patrick Mahomes, not getting to the quarterback. So they went out, got a big name for the pass rush, and that was Von Miller, who was just coming off a Super Bowl win with the Los Angeles Rams. So with the bolstered pass rush, and obviously one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL in Josh Allen, the Bills looked poised to right the wrong from the season prior. And they got off to a good start with impressive primetime performances from Josh Allen, the offense. They picked up right where they left off. And that stronger defensive line against, ironically, Von Miller's former team in the Rams and the Tennessee Titans. Miller's presence was exactly felt right out of the gate. He greatly jolted the pass rush in the secondary, despite missing corner Tre'Davious White and lost safety Micah Hyde to a week 2 neck injury for the season. And the offense, remained largely a pretty impressive unit, like I said. However, one of the biggest glaring flaws for the Bills throughout the season was Josh Allen's frequent turnovers. And I feel like either he was trying too hard or the Bills were making him try too hard, which attributed to the Bills' 3 losses of the season against the Dolphins, the Jets, and the Minnesota Vikings. And yeah, they also faced some issues with the running game too, with Den Singletary and James Cook. But eventually they found some ground to hopefully balance out and take out some pressure off of Allen. So he wouldn't run the ball as much, but he still ran it anyway. So after the loss of the Vikings, the Bills would win their final 6 games of the season, and they won their 3rd straight AFC East title by beating on the Chicago Bears. But unfortunately, during that stretch, they lost Von Miller in the Thanksgiving game to a torn ACL. The pass rush again took a noticeable hit. So after they won the AFC East title, they were going into their matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals in pole position to win out the AFC's top seed and home field advantage throughout the playoffs. But unfortunately, we had that scary incident with safety Damar Hamlin having that cardiac arrest. And I'm just very fortunate. I'm very thankful that the Bills and the Bengals came together, and all that emotion, all that craziness, they came together in unity for a fallen player, especially coaches Sean McDermott and Zach Taylor, and decided we're not playing this game. We can't play this game. like a player nearly died on the field. And if the NFL wants to say, no, you're playing this game, screw you, we can't. And I'm just very glad that Damar Hamlin is alive and well. He's breathing and he's standing. I'm just hopeful once he's able to play football again. So they had to settle for the 2 seed because of the revised playoff formatting. And in the playoffs, they barely outlasted the Dolphins in that crazy game where Josh Allen's turnovers, it really got to him again. But in the proper matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals in the divisional game where the Bills were the host, the Bills, they were beaten up badly by Cincinnati at home. So even though the Bills had a 13-3 season, won the AFC East division title again, it was not a great end for them. And, sure, I would say it was disappointing and all that, but honestly, I really can't blame them for how really crappy the season ended, how crappy the season went for them. Because by the time you got to the end of the season, especially with how things have gone for them towards the end, you could clearly tell in those last 3 games that they were just not there. They were not emotionally there because of everything that had gone on during that season. Severe blizzards, the Damar Hamlin situation. They were really hurting emotionally within. They were just too checked out mentally and emotionally. So, it really sucked for a team that was pegged for a Super Bowl run. And it would have been a really great moment had they made that run, made it all the way, maybe even won it. It would have been a great emotional win for them. But I just say the most important thing is that their teammate, Damar Hamlin, the city of Buffalo, is thriving and their teammate is alive and well. So looking at the offseason so far for the Bills, they're pretty much it's pretty small moves and pretty much from within moves. Trying to look at how can we get better? How can we try to bounce back from what was a very emotional season? So even though they lost linebacker Tremaine Edmonds to the Bears, and they released receiver Isaiah McKenzie, they did sign former Cowboys guard Connor McGovern to beef up that offensive line, which was kind of a weakness for the Bills because that caused Josh Allen to go out of the pocket more and create those turnovers. So adding Connor McGovern to the offensive line should help things, especially on the interior. They did re-sign Jordan Poyer, so a key part of that Bills defense is staying. So some of the things they still have to address, though, is adding to that offensive line. So they do have to address the center. They do have to address right guard. So the Bills should continue to at least add some depth to that interior offensive line. They should also look for another receiver or two opposite Stephon Diggs and Gabriel Davis. Gabriel Davis didn't have as good of a year as he did in 2021. And we all know Stephon Diggs is a really good receiver. It's just that he needs help. He needs a lot of help. And at linebacker, you need to find Tremaine Edmonds' replacement in the draft. So overall, not the season to be for the Bills in 2022, especially on an emotional standpoint. But for Bills Mafia, like I said, the most important thing is that even though you didn't get to the goal in 2022, the teammate in Damar Hamlin is alive and well, and it can always do it again in 2023. Run it back. Hopefully, they'll make it right in the coming fall and win the damn thing. And with that, that is the end of part 5 of our 2022 NFL season recaps. So, we covered 4 teams in this episode. Just 4. That was the divisional playoff losers. That was the Jacksonville Jaguars, the Dallas Cowboys, the New York Giants, and the Buffalo Bills. So, how did your team do if you're a fan of these teams? Or in general, just how did these teams do in this past NFL season? Let me know your thoughts, whether it's in the comments on YouTube or send me a message on Twitter and Instagram at Cold Lasagna. So anyway, we just have one more set of recaps to go. And that is the final part 6 in the next episode. We got 3 final teams to cover: the AFC Championship runner-up, the Super Bowl runner-up, and the Super Bowl champion. Of course, you already know who that is. I already talked about it at the beginning of the episode. So, yeah, stay tuned. That is coming up real soon. And I'm excited, man. It's the end. The end, ladies and gentlemen. The end is near. So stay tuned for that. But anyway, everyone, thank you for tuning in to episode number 136 of Very Cold Lasagna. I am your filthy casual host, DylanLasagna, bringing you another round of filthy casual takes on this icy yet spicy podcast. So anyway, until next time, keep that lasagna very cold in the fridge with your takes on the world of sports. And until next time, peace out.